Hello, konnichiwa. I'm Tomoko, your Japanese food ambassador. Welcome to my channel where we explore Japanese culinary culture together. Today we will learn about soba. Why soba? Because just like Americans eat turkey for Thanksgiving, we Japanese people eat soba for New Year's Eve. It's called Toshikoshi Soba. It's a tradition that started in 1700 in mid-Edo period. The long and then thin soba noodles represent longevity. So we are not eating just to eat. We are making wish for the good health in the new year. Soba is made from buckwheat flour. Back in the old days, when soba was made only with 100% buckwheat without today's technology or skill, the noodles were fragile and then easily broken. So in that context, soba was seen as a way to break away from the previous year's bad fortune and then wish for the better new year. Now that you know the story, let's learn how to cook some delicious soba for the new year. Soba is a simple dish. Traditionally, you eat either hot or cold, dipping or soup, depending on your preference. I like cold soba dipped in cold sesame dipping sauce, but today because we are making for Toshikoshi Soba, let's make it warm because it was how my family did. Believe it or not, the most important part of cooking soba isn't about flavor of the soup. That's the easy part, as nowadays ready-made soba soup bases are pretty easy to find. The key to make soba is cooking the noodles perfectly. First thing we learned today is how to pick a soba. There are so many soba at the market today, which is great, but it's kind of overwhelming, which we don't know which soba to choose. If you never bought a soba before, you might not know what to look for. So allow me to share. Today I'm using fantastic fresh soba from one of my favorite restaurants in Southern California, Otafuku. I'm testing their take-home soba kit for Toshikoshi Soba. I received a tasting batch fresh soba noodles from Otafuku restaurant in Gardena to test how it can be boiled at home, because soba is all about texture. You can use almost any kind of noodles that you find at your local grocery store. Almost any kind. Like any product you buy, you always want to check out the ingredients label. As long as buckwheat is the first ingredient listed, you are in business. Sometimes dry soba package will list wheat flour, which means there are more wheat flour than buckwheat, which provides chewier texture but ends up tasting like udon more than soba, which defeats the purpose. Here's your language lesson for the day. If you want 100% buckwheat noodles, look for this character. It represents 10 in Japanese and look like plus sign. This is called 10割 soba, meaning 100% soba. If you are watching your gluten intake, keep in mind most soba noodles on the shelf uses wheat flour as a binding, so treat with caution. In Japan, soba is regulated. The soba at most of Japanese noodle shops needs to contain more than 50% buckwheat to be called soba. But packaged dry noodles are required to contain only 30% or more buckwheat. As you can imagine, fresh soba from specialty soba restaurant is ideal, but not every city outside of Japan has good soba shop. Luckily, there are online stores along with many grocery stores that sells buckwheat noodles. So finding dry soba noodle is more convenient than you might have thought. And quite frankly, some of them are pretty good. I listed a few recommendations that you can buy below in the description. Now we know how to choose a soba. Let's start cooking. First step you think it's boiling noodles, right? Wrong. Because the texture of soba is very important, making broth for the soba is your first task, as it needs to be ready when the noodles are boiled. Today I'm making oyster soba, as oysters are in season, and then believe me, this is one of the best dish I ever made. All you need are shackled oysters, soy sauce, mirin, and then potato starch, Katakuriko. If you can't find the Katakuriko at the Asian grocery store, cornstarch will do the trick. I've also provided links to buy Katakuriko below. First thing to do with the oyster is to drain them from the package and then pat them dry if necessary. Then cover with Katakuriko flour and fry in a pan with some neutral oil. Grip the oyster once while cooking, and then afterwards, add seasoning and then equal parts of soy sauce and mirin. If you like dish to be less sweet, use less mirin. This might make the dish cook rather quickly and then burn a bit, but you'll find this burn adds a nice smokiness to the broth. Once the oysters are cooked and in season, the next step is add them to dashi broth to keep them warm. Now the most important part, boiling noodles. Before you begin, have these ready in advance. The biggest part to boil the soba: big bowl, strainer, a timer, cold water or water with ice. Boil the water in big pot and then really let it boil until you see bubbles coming up quickly. And no, you don't have to salt the water. Now that we have water boiling, it's time to add soba. Fresh soba cook rather quickly, so make sure you have timer ready. How many minutes? With dried noodles, follow the instruction on package. As the noodles swim in the boiling water, resist the urge to stir too often. I recommend leaving them alone for a while and then only mixing it once to make sure the noodles doesn't stick together. Like I mentioned before, soba noodles are rather fragile, so you don't want to break the noodles and then deprive yourself from fun slurping later. When the timer sounds, immediately drain the noodles while saving hot water and wash away the surface in cold water, which will also prevent noodles from continuing to cook from the heat. If you are having soba warm, dip your noodles in boiling water you saved just for a second after washing the noodles in cold water. Now all that left is add your noodles in a bowl, add soup, then add a few toppings. All this may sound a little too overcomplicated just for a simple noodle dish. Just remember 2 basic steps. First, prepare your soup base first. Second, get the big pot of boiling water. And whatever you do, don't overboil. Now let's eat. Itadakimasu. I know you want a perfect noodle leaf picture, but texture of noodles changes every second you waste on a perfect shot. That may get you a few likes on social media, but eating the best texture of noodles stays in your memory forever. So eat your noodles as soon as it's ready. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I'll be honored if you subscribe to my channel so we can continue to explore and then learn about Japanese food together. Until next time, thank you so much. ありがとうございました。ではまた。